in the background.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Brianna Boyington, and I'm an education producer at U.S. News and World Report. Today we're going to talk about one of probably the most dreaded parts of the college application process, and that is writing the college application essay. Joining us today, we have Kasey Urquidez, Dean of the Undergraduate Admissions at the University of Arizona, Leslie Braat, Associate Director of Admissions at Oberlin College, and Dr. Katherine Cohen, CEO of IvyWise, an educational consulting company. And they're going to give you some great tips on how you can write a great college application essay. For the viewers who are joining us live today, you can use the Q&A app to submit questions to our panelists, and if we have time at the end of the chat, we will get to some of your questions. So let's get started. Leslie, let's start with you. We received several questions from some of our social media followers, and this one comes from Twitter. What are schools looking for in a college essay? Is it more about content or writing skills?
I think it's a combination of both. I think what we really want to know from your essay is something that we can't get from your grade point average, your test scores, your list of activities. So your story, kind of in other words. But I know 650 words is not a lot of words to tell your story. So part of the challenge I think students have is the structure of their essay. We want to make sure that these essays are something we're happy to hand over to our professors who know that you can write a good essay as a freshman. So your essay is really doing kind of double duty. You're telling us who you are, and you're telling us that you can write.
Excellent. And so, sort of in that same field, what's the criteria for a compelling college application essay? And that question comes from Shaba Shams from Facebook. And then to think about that a little more, let's talk about how students can use their essays to set themselves apart when applying to competitive universities that receive a lot of application. And speaking of competitive universities, let's talk about the University of Arizona. Kasey, can you answer that question for us?
Sure. Well, I think that one of the most important things is to be authentic and to be yourself. And so really thinking through that college application and the process a little bit before you get started is very important. And knowing what you want to say and how you want to get that out there before you start typing it in is really, really crucial. So you want to make sure that you're being that authentic self and giving examples of ways that you either overcome something or that something that you've done that might set you apart. You've got to remember they're reading a lot of essays, and so it's important to set yourself apart and not just recreate your resume, but give information that will really help so they can see who the real you is all about, what you're all about.
Excellent. And Kat, I wanted to give you an opportunity to answer that question as well. Do you have any other tips for students about sort of specific things that they can do to make their application essays a little bit more competitive?
Well, I think what's already been said, I absolutely agree with. I think it's very important for the student to tell an admissions officer something they can't already learn from the rest of their application, because they don't want you to just rehash your whole resume on your personal statement. I do also want to mention that many colleges have multiple essays. Their colleges have supplements that require a lot of writing, and so when we counsel students, we make sure that they're, first of all, answering each of the questions, and that even goes for the personal statement. If the college accepts the common application, there are specific prompts, and the college is going to be looking that you are actually answering the question. But then another thing to think about is how can you show off different sides to who you are, also in those supplemental essays, to give sense of your whole self to that admissions officer and things that they can't learn from the teacher recommendations or from your activity list. So that's what we help students do to make them set themselves apart.
Excellent. And this next question is, does admissions prefer an essay that may appear depressing or quirky, or a humorous essay that may be a bit risky? And that came from Natalie Gonzalez on Twitter. So to think about that a little bit more, how important is tone in an essay? Leslie?
Sure. I think if a student has had something unfortunate happen to them that they want to share with their essay, that's fine. But I think the essay needs to take a twist and say, this is what happened to me. here's how I overcame this. This is the positives that have come out of it. So you kind of want to end on maybe a life lesson learned in that instance instead of leaving us with kind of being depressed after reading the essay. Like the hope in the end is what we might be looking for. If a student is trying to come across as being a little quirkier or funny, I think that's fine if that's how they really are. We can kind of tell when a student is forcing that almost. It's just not a natural feel or a cadence when we're reading the essay. So I would say if the student does want to tackle a subject that is a little bit less upbeat or something more upbeat, that's fine as long as the substance is there. And again, the end, the kind of conclusion or what they've learned from this is going to be so critical in those cases.
I think one thing about her question that was interesting is that she described the humorous essay as being a bit more risky. Is there a certain tone that comes off as more risky? How should students sort of weigh risk when it comes to tone of essay?
I think, again, remember, we're going to be passing these essays along to our faculty members who are going to be seeing them, so they are going beyond our admissions office. I think anytime a student is writing almost like in a flip way or writing like they text, you know, using LOL instead of laughing out loud, that's problematic, I think, for us because we're looking for content. We're looking for good writers in addition to the story. So, you know, if they're trying to be funny and using maybe more, you know, slang in the essay, that's probably not going to come across the best way or the way that they hope it's going to come across when we read them.
And Kat and Kasey, I see you guys laughing. Did you guys have anything else that you wanted to add to that question or that response?
I wanted to add. Oh, sorry.
I don't know. Humor is very hard to pull off as well. So I think students need to make sure they run their essays either by their English teacher or their high school counselor or their independent counselor. If they're going to go with a risky, humorous topic, to make sure it really is humorous. Because a lot of kids might think they're funny, but it might not come off as funny. So you have to be careful with that. And the other thing I would say is, in talking about the depressing statements, when you read an essay like that, oftentimes those essays are about somebody else. So somebody you know, passed away that they knew, or somebody had something tragic happen to them. And what students need to be careful of is you want to be the star of your own essay. You don't want to make the essay all about this other person or this other event. So that's one of the risks of also doing something that could potentially come off as depressing.
And Kasey, did you have anything to add?
I'll just close up that question with talking about kind of what we started with, being that authentic self. If you have a humorous style and you are being authentic, and again, running that by different people, having them prove it for you, but also reading it aloud to yourself, and do you sound like yourself? I mean, is that who you authentically are? That's the kind of thing that you want to really pay attention to, because it does come across when we're reading those essays as true or not, and so that's important that you actually hear your own voice in it.
Excellent. Okay, for our next question, let's talk about essay topics. Are there any topics that students should avoid discussing in their college essay? And I'll let you start with that, Kasey.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know that I would say that there's anything that specifically should be avoided. Again, it goes back to what you believe is the right thing for you to get out there to the staff and faculty who are reviewing those. I think that one of the most important things is to really, once you pick that topic, is to stay with that topic and be able to focus on it so you can get your full story out and be able to do that within the concise way that you need to for your essay. So I would say just make sure that it's something that is relevant and it stays on point.
Leslie, do you agree, or do you feel like there are any topics that are maybe a little too taboo for the college application essay?
I think a lot depends on how the student approaches the topic. I would say if the student is comfortable sharing that essay with their parents or with their English teachers, then it's probably okay. But if it's something they don't want anyone else to see other than the college folks reading this, then it's probably not a good idea.
Excellent. And Kat, do you have anything?
I would just add that I think there are topics to stay away from. I think things that you might only reveal to your therapist, for example, or talking about your, love relationships in your essay, or making an apology for grades or test scores would be a topic to avoid. Another topic I think students should avoid is a topic that's sort of global or universal. And I remember after 9/11, there were literally hundreds of thousands of students writing about 9/11, and it ended up becoming, this sort of topic that became almost cliche in admissions offices because everyone felt connected to this world event. So I would say try to keep it close to home about yourself, the story that only you can tell. But I definitely think there's topics that students should avoid.
And you mentioned something that touches on my next question, which is actually how students should discuss bad grades in their college application essay. So, Kasey, do you have any advice? I mean, Kat mentioned that it's probably something that you shouldn't apologize for in your essay, but do you have any advice on how students should actually discuss bad grades or any other academic issues that may be reflected in their transcript and that they want to sort of clear the air with in their essay?
Sure, and that's one of the main reasons that we at the University of Arizona had started our essay portion, is because we want students to be able to explain things that may have happened that can't necessarily be explained just by looking at a transcript. So we want to be able to hear from a student, did something happen during that time in high school where you just didn't do as well because of something? And it's, again, speaking a little bit to what Leslie said earlier, it's really being able to talk about how you overcame that. And hopefully you can talk about that as a 1 or 2 semester kind of thing where something happened that you just need to explain. And it could be something that's not a, one of those depressing topics or something. It could be something small, but it did affect you. And so again, it goes back to you sharing your story, being authentic, and getting that information out. I think that's really important for the committee on our side to really understand that you identify that and you make corrections so that you're prepared for college.
Excellent. Did you have anything else to add with that, Leslie?
Yeah, I would say, depending on how bad the grades are, this might be a better topic for the college counselor or a recommender to write about and not have that be the focus of the essay. We'll see a poor grade on a transcript and assume there's an explanation. Now, where that comes from is up to the student. I would rather have them discuss this with a counselor about how that's going to be approached in the recommendation letter, and then let the student focus on something else about themselves, I think, in the essay. Because when I'm done with the essay, I kind of come away with learning something about a student. If I already know they had a poor grade, yes, I'm interested in why, but I think I'd rather be more interested in something else that they can tell me that I'm not already suspicious that something happened along the way.
Yeah, that's exactly the advice we give students too. If they did have something happen in their life that affect grades, if there was a dip or a downward trend, just speak to their high school counselor and make sure that that gets communicated from the counselor to the school, because you don't want to take your personal statement and use that space, I don't think, for that topic. However, many applications allow for additional information, so if there was something very personal and specific that happened, or a student had some very serious illness, they might have a couple of paragraphs somewhere else to give it a little bit more color, but I always think it's much better coming from the high school counselor.
You guys have mentioned a lot of interesting points, so I do want to ask this question because I think sort of deciding whether to write about bad grades can be confusing for students. So what's the best way for students to choose a topic for their college application essay, especially the personal statement? Do you have any advice on that, Kasey?
I think for us here at the University of Arizona, we provide the prompts for them, and so there's not as much that has to go into picking something specific. But for those students that I work with that are across the country that are applying to other places, and we always try to help students, and it's really that focus on what you're passionate about. Being able to really pull from something that you believe in strongly will make the best statement.
And Leslie, did you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, we use the Common Application, and again, the essay prompts are provided. And I know many students who write several essays, actually maybe in a rough draft form, and then they share them with people, maybe their college counselor or a parent, a teacher, to say, which one do you think presents me in the best light, or which one sounds most like me? So I don't think that we can say, pick this topic, this is definitely the thing we want to read about every student, because then I think we get a little bored reading thousands and thousands and thousands of essays on the same topic. But I think as long as the student feels like they are best represented in whatever topic they choose, then that's going to be a good choice for them.
Excellent. Kat, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
You know, I think it's important to spend some time brainstorming and being thoughtful about whichever prompts are on the applications that you're filling out. And it's not something you want to do the week before, the night before. You want to think about it several months in advance and be thoughtful with it. And as you know, I think as Leslie was saying, you know, take those ideas and bounce them off the people who know you the best, and try to represent who you are in the best possible light. A lot of the, you know, common applications have those supplements, and one of the common essays that you'll see on a supplement is, why do you want to come to this school? Which is another essay that students need to be thoughtful about, and they need to make sure that they do their research ahead of time. So another mistake I would say I see out there are students who are just applying to schools willy-nilly or because of a name, and they're not really prepared to answer that question, why this school? Or they have some stock answer that they want to cut and copy and paste onto lots of applications, which is another big mistake. So it is important to be thoughtful about each of the prompts. Do your research on your schools. Know why the school is a good fit for you and what you're going to bring to that school. And make sure that your answers, because you are limited with the amount of space or word count or character count in some cases, make sure that every word counts in your answer. So as they say, the devil's in the details, and those details are critical.
Excellent. So we're coming to the end of our time. For our final question, I want to ask all three of you, what are some common mistakes that students should avoid? And Leslie, let's start with you.
Okay. I think, again, I go back to the essay being a chance to let admissions officers know something that we can't find out about you somewhere else in your application. So if you attend a performing arts high school and you're a dance major and all your extracurricular activities involve dance, and then you write an essay about your love of dance, I mean, I like to think I'm a fairly intelligent person. I probably could have figured you loved to dance ahead of time. So take that opportunity to tell us something that we couldn't learn from other parts of your application.
Excellent. And Kat, could you share some of the common mistakes you've seen?
I see a lot of mistakes. I think the biggest mistake I see is not following directions. So either not answering the prompt, not following the word counts or character counts, not doing enough research on the school that you're applying to. I also tell students, you know, spell check is not going to catch your sharp angel when you mean sharp angle, or your black belt in, you know, marital arts when you mean martial arts. So you have to be very careful with you know, your grammar and how you present yourself. And I think, as we talked about before, it's not a text, it's not a tweet. You know, you have to, all of your responses need to be well written. And then I would just say that you don't want to be redundant. And this is another mistake I see, where on an application maybe there's several essays you have to write or several prompts. So try to show off different sides to who you are in the different prompts instead of rehashing things. And a lot of times I'll see students, maybe they'll write their personal statement on their love of soccer, and then there's a little activity essay, and it's all about, you know, kicking the winning soccer goal. Okay, so we know about that. Let's think about something else.
Excellent. And Kasey, do you have any final thoughts?
Well, going back to what Kat said earlier about not researching your school, I think one of the worst things I see is when a student tells you how much they love the University of blank, and it's not the university they're applying to at that time. So I think that's one of the biggest mistakes, and that's just that simple proofreading and making sure that you know exactly which place you're submitting to, because that definitely is a turnoff. So that's one of the common mistakes we see here and there. Not too often, but something students should definitely be aware of.
Awesome. Well, that's all the time that we have today. Leslie, Kat, Kasey, thank you so much for joining us and providing such helpful tips for our readers. Thank you, viewers, for tuning in. If you need more information on preparing for college, be sure to visit usnews.com, and you can follow US News Education on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.